This week, I'm taking on the JetBlue 25 for 25 challenge, part 1. I also get stranded not once, not twice, not 3 times. In hindsight, should I have waited to film a JetBlue plane for good luck here? Stay tuned. So what is the JetBlue 25 for 25 challenge? It's basically a promotion for their 25th anniversary where if you take flights to 15 unique JetBlue destinations, you get 150,000 bonus miles, or points in their case for TrueBlue points. 20 destinations gets you an additional 200,000 TrueBlue points. 25 destinations, hence the 25 for 25 challenge, gets you Mosaic 1 status for 25 years. Now, what is that status actually worth? It's basically the equivalent status of American Airlines Gold or United and Delta Silver status. So the first elite status with those other airlines. Now that's according to their benefits, but in reality, and after doing this challenge now for the first 15 destinations, it seems like there's a lot less elite members with JetBlue. So if you do have their status, it's actually worth a lot more because you're not competing for upgrades in most cases. Now I want to briefly describe how I booked my original plan for the 15 destinations. And I did this with 70,000 Chase points that I transferred at a 1-to-1 ratio to JetBlue. Also, I had a stash of 30,000 Etihad miles that were left over from a previous cancel. I used those as well because you can book JetBlue flights with Etihad guest miles. Also, there's taxes and fees involved with these reservations. For the US, it's fairly small. It's usually between $5 to $12 range. But outside the US, and you'll need to hit 25 destinations if you're going for the full 25, that will add up quickly with the international destinations having more taxes and fees. So be ready for that. That totaled about $750 in my case, mixing in a couple of cash reservations as well. And that's just to get to the 15 unique destinations. Now I did this without doing any credit card sign-up bonuses. That doesn't mean you can't go that route. Just remember that you'll need to hit the sign-up bonus threshold prior to the end of the year and book your flights by the end of the year and complete the flights by the end of the year. So there's kind of a tight window. If you're going to go to the sign-up bonus route, you would have to hit it really quickly and then book your flights right away. Why would someone like me actually want to do this challenge? My main goal is to basically trade my Chase and Etihad points and miles to get 350,000 TrueBlue points. So what can you actually do with that amount of points with JetBlue? Well, JetBlue actually has partnerships with Etihad, Qatar Airways, Japan Airlines, and maybe some more as well that have really high quality business and first class products, which I like using those kind of airlines to travel back and forth to Asia, whether it's through Bangkok, through Vietnam, Malaysia. And that amount of points, about 350,000, just by completing the 20 destinations, that's worth about 2 round trips, business and first class, to Asia. So that's worth a lot to me versus what I had now with the 70,000 with Chase and 30 or so thousand with Etihad. That's not getting me a whole lot of value. So I'm just trading that small amount of points to get even more and basically pay it forward as an investment to future trips. So now let's go through the flights I actually booked. Starting with day 1, which was a Tuesday. This could be replicated in the future, especially right now. September, October timeframe is the slowest travel season up until Columbus Day and maybe even Halloween as well. So day 1, starting airport for me was Detroit. I booked an Etihad ticket to start because I knew that that was the most reliable one that I wouldn't need to cancel. Etihad tickets have terrible cancellation policies, so if you do end up booking some of those, I recommend doing it at the front of your trip, because those are the least likely to need to be changed. So Detroit to JFK, JFK to Boston, Boston to DCA, which is Washington. That was an 18,000 mile reservation with Etihad. There were some taxes and fees involved with that. But in this case, this was one of the few ways to get to Washington and knock that out as a destination. I didn't see a lot of ways to do that with JetBlue, so this made perfect sense. Also on day one, I booked a ticket from DCA back to Boston, Boston to West Palm Beach to get my 4th destination in day one. The Brightline train is not until 5:50 a.m., which arrives in Fort Lauderdale at 6:30. Uber is the only option left to make the 7:15 flight. Day 2 started from Fort Lauderdale near West Palm, and that was an early flight to Punta Cana, Punta Cana to San Juan, San Juan to Santiago, Santiago back to San Juan. That way I could start day 3 from there. Day 3, San Juan to St. Thomas, St. Thomas back to San Juan. When going to those destinations, St. Thomas, St. Croix, those are only once per day flights with JetBlue. So it's kind of tricky to schedule those. If you're going to do those, you're really only doing one of those destinations per day. You're not going to be able to knock out St. Croix and St. Thomas in the same day. So day 4, San Juan again to St. Croix this time, St. Croix back to San Juan, and from San Juan to Tampa. Day 4 overnight in Tampa. Day 5 starts from there. Tampa to Cancun, Cancun to Fort Lauderdale. Remember, before I only started from Fort Lauderdale. I did not fly into Fort Lauderdale to count it as a destination. So day 5, that counts as a destination this time. And we stopped there for the day. Day 6. So now we've already completed 13 destinations. No, 12. We finished 12 by this time. Day 6 starts from Orlando. So this was going to require taking the Brightline from Fort Lauderdale to Orlando at some point in that evening or early morning. Orlando to Nassau, Bahamas. Nassau back to Orlando, because I didn't fly into Orlando before. It counts as a destination now. Then Orlando to Richmond, Virginia. That would be destination 15, all done in 6 days. Of course, nothing goes as planned, especially when you're scheduling 15 destinations and a total of like 17 flights like I did. Something's bound to go wrong. And in this case, I had a couple of self-inflicted mistakes that caused some changes to these reservations. Don't forget to follow the Travel Strategist on YouTube. Also, part 2 is coming out soon of how I would do this challenge differently. So what happened on day 1? You're going to see my videos begin at Washington, going to Boston, because I had such a hectic morning. I just didn't get started with filming with my Insta360 camera that I usually have on my shoulder. So that was a little bit delayed. And so it started off my morning. It was very hectic of figuring out the parking situation. I had prepaid parking at my hotel, the Holiday Inn, Detroit Airport, but they didn't tell me when I booked it that I wasn't actually leaving the car at the hotel. I found that out in the morning, that I needed to take it across the street, catch the bus, and I was already running late, so that was hectic. But I did actually make the flight on time, so I did actually make the flights on time, the first 2, so it was Detroit to JFK, JFK to Boston, and then the video starts from there. So let's get started with that. Here we are at destination number 3, Washington, DCA Airport, and a view of my plane from just outside of the Centurion Lounge. The next stop is back to Boston. While this doesn't count as a destination because I've already been here this morning, the flight cost of about 11,400 points more closely aligns with my target of 10,000 points per flight. Also note, the direct flights DCA to Fort Lauderdale are only in the morning, which does not fit my challenge as currently scheduled. JetBlue has surprisingly fast Wi-Fi at 60 megabits per second. This is the fastest Wi-Fi I've experienced on any US-based carrier. We were blessed with amazing weather today. Official observation in flight by yours truly, a recovering Air Force weather forecaster. Scattered skies at 8,000 feet and a slight sea breeze en route. No hazards expected. Because of the short flight time to Boston and a low flight altitude, I was able to take in breathtaking views on this approach, starting with this old lighthouse. If anyone knows the name of it and whether it has historical significance, leave a comment below. I'm a history buff for this sort of thing.
Overhead bins of items tend to move during flight. If you have a receipt that's of claim at gate, you may pick up your items outside the front boarding door. If you need any assistance getting off the plane, feel free to...
For this stop, I was excited to use my 1 annual Priority Pass visit to the Sapphire Lounge through my Marriott Brilliant card. I downgraded the Sapphire Reserve card, which gives unlimited access due to the high annual fee increase this year. However, I have at least 3 cards with Priority Pass that I can leverage for up to 3 visits, and there's only a few of these lounges anyway. Now we have a situation. This is situation number 1. I spent too much time in the Sapphire Lounge at Boston. Yes, I was trying to get some work done for my master's class. Yes, I had some alcoholic beverages, and I lost track of time a little bit. But the real killer was after trying to leave the lounge, I left my roller bag in the bathroom. So on my way to the gate, I realized that halfway and boarding had already started. So by the time I got back to the lounge, grabbed the bag, got back to the gate, boarding was done. So missed that flight. I was able to luckily reschedule from Boston, but instead going to Orlando, and that caused a cascade of events to where I had to switch around basically majority of my flights. And I was able to reschedule that for just a $75 change fee. In hindsight, I probably would have just called JetBlue instead of dealing with the airport agents, because I realized that prior to takeoff, you can actually cancel your reservations for a full refund. So in hindsight, I would have done that differently. But now, if you guys run into a similar scenario, just call JetBlue, cancel it over the phone, get your refund prior to takeoff. I actually got really lucky with this change of Boston to Orlando instead, because it was a delayed flight coming from a different destination to Boston that even allowed me to catch this flight. And this was going to be a really late night flight from Boston, about 0:30 in the morning, as they say, and arriving about just before 4 a.m. in Orlando. Now keep in mind, the Brightline trains from Orlando going to South Florida begin at 0425. And it was very important for me to hit that very first train to get to Fort Lauderdale in time for my flights there. I did end up making the train on time. It's actually a really long walk to get from the gate all the way through the terminals and then out of the airport to Brightline, but it is right there at the airport. Just a really long walk to get there, so give yourself plenty of time if you use this similar kind of strategy. This train arrived in Fort Lauderdale at about 07:15 in the morning, and I actually had to reschedule for different flights from Fort Lauderdale because I wasn't arriving early enough for my original plan. So I changed this day 2 schedule to Fort Lauderdale to Montego Bay, Jamaica, Jamaica back to Fort Lauderdale. It counts as 2 destinations there. And then I also ended up booking a flight from Fort Lauderdale in the evening to Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. These changes didn't really end up costing me much money out of pocket, but it did cause a scheduling issue with all the later flights to where my entire trip ended up taking about 1 or 2 extra days. While enjoying my breakfast at the Escape Lounge earlier, I realized through the JetBlue app that my flight to Montego Bay had the entire exit row available. So at the gate, I purchased the window seat there and got the entire row to myself. Big win since I did not get a hotel last night. I did test several times during this trip to see if I could just ask for an exit row at the gate for free. No luck. JetBlue is basically an upgraded version of Spirit where you pay for everything until you get elite status. I didn't realize until halfway through the challenge that I could status match with my Delta Gold status. This would have been very helpful. However, I was also pleasantly surprised that when someone tried to sit in the exit row right before takeoff on this flight, the flight attendant actually questioned them and made them move to another seat because they did not pay for the seat. So I was pleasantly surprised since I did pay for it. Jamaica does have a mandatory online immigration form, so I recommend you get that done while on your flight or before while you have strong Wi-Fi. The Caribbean airports are not considered transit airports like Doha, Abu Dhabi, and some others where you can fly through without clearing customs. In Jamaica, you have to clear customs, so it's not advisable to book the next returning flight. Take the second flight and plan accordingly for clearing customs twice in the airport. After clearing customs and rescheduling my return flight to Fort Lauderdale with the check-in agent at JetBlue, I used my priority pass to check in with Club Mosaic. This will gain me access to the priority security lane and Club Mosaic lounge, which is on par with any of the Amex lounges I've been to in the past. I will show you glimpses of that in a moment. And now you can see as I'm entering the security lane, the line to my right, which is the standard security lane, is much longer, and this is just a highlight of how valuable this priority lane actually is with Club Mosaic. Now, after showing my Club Mosaic pass here and showing my boarding pass, the agent will guide me through security. Of course, after entering this first Club Mosaic lounge, I realized this is not the one that has showers. So of course, I wanted to go to the other one. This second Club Mosaic lounge is next to gate 12, which ended up being closer to my gate. This one, however, is without the airport traffic views. If that's your thing, go to the other club, Mosaic. I was really impressed with the Jamaican food selection here. Full bar and features such as massages, which I'm sure is an extra cost. Here, I was super thankful to be able to take a shower. On my way to the gate, I stopped at one of those gift shops and bought 2 shot glasses with the map of Jamaica on them. This is a great way for me to share my journey with family later. And eventually I got over to the gate and realized that the Jamaica 500 was lining up at the gate for priority boarding, and this might be a while. I was right. Let's just go have a seat. My next flight wasn't until 11 p.m., so when comparing lounges, I would rather spend more time in this lounge versus the Escape Lounge in Fort Lauderdale. Eventually, we did board, and I'm showing a brief view of my exit row seat, again, that I purchased for this flight as well as a flight to Montego Bay. 8:30 p.m. we did arrive in Fort Lauderdale, and this is kind of a bummer because the Escape Lounge in Fort Lauderdale closes at about 9 or 9:30, and so I didn't get to take advantage of that because I had to go through customs. Back in 2023, while I was exiting the Air Force and I knew my TSA pre-check was about to expire, I applied for global entry through one of my premium travel cards, and I expected it to be approved fairly quickly since I already had TSA pre-check. That was not the case. It took over 10 months to get a pre-approval, and then I was never at an airport where I could do the in-person interviews until today. As I was going through the regular immigration line at Fort Lauderdale, the agent just randomly said to me, "Hey, I see that you're conditionally approved for global entry. Do you want to do your interview today?" And this was amazing. I said, "Of course I do." And of course I had to wait 30 minutes for an agent to be available and actually do the interview. I think they were on lunch breaks or whatever, but I was able to do that. So that will be a key for later, that I was able to obtain global entry, speed up immigration process for later. I originally scheduled a hotel for San Juan, and I booked that with Hilton with points. Since that reservation had to be canceled, I now had a stash of points that I'm now using for a 35K stay in Santo Domingo. Since I didn't get to take advantage of the Escape Lounge this time in Fort Lauderdale, I did order a cheese board with Malbec wine on board my flight to Santo Domingo, and I actually really enjoyed it. For $15, I think it's a pretty fair deal on board a flight. Unique destination number 8, Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. It is important to note here, there's also an e-ticket QR code deal here in Dominican Republic, similar to Jamaica. You need to fill out that form prior to going through immigration. I highly recommend just doing this on the plane on your way there. I, of course, did not do my research and did not fill out the form in advance, so luckily I was able to get in touch with a nice immigration official who helped me out with that.
Hello, all passengers this way? Peep a little.
The aromatherapy on JetBlue flights, which is mixed in with the AC, looks like a giant vape cloud, but it's very convenient for people like me who don't take showers for 24 hours. But
This is your one.
up to this point, I still don't have my global entry pass ID, and I made the dumb mistake of getting in the foreigners line in Puerto Rico.
Day 3, from Santo Domingo to San Juan, I made another kind of critical mistake of not checking in through the app on time. And I didn't realize you would have to do that an hour prior. With it being an international flight, I wanted to wait until I actually got to San Juan to check in for that flight going on to St. Thomas. So that was a self-inflicted mistake, and I ended up rescheduling that for a later day. So if you do end up doing changes and cancellations to your flights, remember that the TrueBlue Blue fares they are fully refundable. But the cash portion of it, so that the taxes and fees or cash rate, will be refunded as travel bank cash in your JetBlue account. It's not refunded back to the method of payment. And it is available right away. So if you cancel, you can immediately reschedule your next flight and rearrange everything.
Since I missed my flight to St. Thomas and back, I decided to just cut my losses for the day and enjoy my nice hotel that I purchased. This is probably the most expensive hotel on the trip, over $200 per night, Courtyard Marriott, which is right on the beach. And I'm going to check in now. I was actually fairly impressed with this hotel for being a Courtyard Marriott. It has casino,
Can I check in here?
beach access, pool, gym, all of that.
Checking in.
It was a little bit pricey. I guess Puerto Rico is getting more expensive now that it's officially a U.S. territory. The check-in process was quick and easy, and this is why I like staying at the same brands, like Marriott in this case, where my loyalty information is already saved. It's a much smoother check-in process and speeds everything up. My overall impression of the hotel is it's definitely dated, but it has all of the nice features that you would look for in a beachside kind of resort, but mixed with the Courtyard Marriott brand, along with having the casino. So it's kind of a weird but nice mix at the same time. Now entering the room, I did use an award upgrade with Marriott. Since I have Titanium Elite status, I tend to rack up those upgrade awards, and this is a king bed junior suite with ocean view. The fastest way to get status with Marriott is through the Marriott Brilliant card that I just showed on the screen, and here's my QR code as well for that as a referral. It helps support me and therefore the channel to bring more content to you guys. Now let's go out to the balcony and check out this amazing view. I did go down to the gym for a much needed workout. However, I was pretty dead by this point after minimal sleep over the past couple of days, so it wasn't a very good workout. However, this workout room does have nice views of the pool area as well as the beach. After my workout, I proceeded down to the hotel restaurant with beach views. While I normally don't like paying for hotel food, I did have a $20 food and beverage credit to use thanks to my Marriott Elite status. I believe Gold Elites and above receive this benefit at this property. Many of the Marriott credit cards will give you Gold status automatically. I have referral links in the description for the 2 Marriott cards I have.
Good afternoon. Ready to sit anywhere? Yeah, we'll go over there.
While waiting for service, I opened up my tablet to re-strategize the St. Thomas destination I missed today. This became a ritual every time I sat down at a restaurant or lounge throughout this week, trying to recover the timeline and minimize costs of additional hotel stays. I also took a moment to check in for my flight to St. Croix the following day. That way I would not end up in the same situation as today, missing the check-in window. Day 5's return ticket from Cancun to Fort Lauderdale was booked with Etihad and virtually non-changeable. Fort Lauderdale does not count as a destination as in my original plan because I've already used it, and now it's only useful as a repositioning flight. I was able to find an early morning flight from Orlando on day 6 that would fit the Brightline schedule. This flight is to Ponce, Puerto Rico, another JetBlue destination for the challenge, and within driving distance to San Juan, where I have more options for the following flight out from Puerto Rico. This flight to Ponce also allowed me to reschedule my trip to St. Thomas. Since the staff here are working on island time, I needed to move near the bar after about 20 minutes of no service. I did enjoy the view here for a moment, but it's time to grab a bite to eat. I ordered the churrasco steak for a net cost of $18. It was tender, served with chimichurri and rice and beans. The following morning, day 5, I went for a run on the beach. No video of that, you'll have to take my word on that. If you do end up staying in San Juan or any tropical destination in the summertime, take advantage of the beach early in the day to avoid afternoon thunderstorms. I was impressed with how the flight attendants on this flight embraced the 25 for 25 challenge and showed such enthusiasm. I was also surprised that there were 5 other challengers on this flight together with me. Myself and another challenger were moved to the front of the plane to run through immigration and get back on the same plane back to San Juan. It's less than a 1-hour turnaround for the return flight, so every second counts. Once I get off the plane, I've already made up my mind that I'm running. I'm assuming that I'll have to go through customs twice. This, however, was not the case. All of a sudden, I'm outside the terminal and looking for departures. This was difficult to find, and luckily after a couple interactions with check-in agents, I found the tiny entrance to departures where I would need to clear customs and immigration on the way out. It turns out running was not the best option here because the other 4 challengers beat me to the line after I ran in circles outside the terminal.
Dancing under the starry night, music strong, it feels so right. No more stress, no more fight, just good vibes, pure delight. Feel the rhythm, let it flow, in the breeze where the palm trees grow. Sunshine high, waves so low, island vibes, let your troubles go.
Going through customs here was kind of a surprise to me since we did not go through customs on the way in, and I'm traveling to another US territory from here with Puerto Rico. Also, I do have global entry by this time, and I have my pass ID and attach it to my reservation to help get through faster. However, I was promptly told that this location only accepts the physical global entry ID. I was confused by this since when I did my interview 2 days prior, I was told that physical cards are not issued. If someone knows the answer to this, comment below. The only info I could find on this topic is that physical cards are not required for air travel and only required for land and sea ports of entry. My assumption is that physical cards are mostly a legacy product and being phased out. Do I need to request a physical ID card? Comment below. Here is one of the other 25 for 25 challengers traveling with me.
You're doing the challenge too?
Yeah.
That was a close one, wasn't it?
It is, yeah. I'm still waiting for my boyfriend.
Yeah, I saw. Was that him that got pulled to the side?
Yeah.
That's so dumb.
Chinese, so he gets extra.
Oh, that's why.
I don't know what they're doing, but I hope it's quick.
Enhanced screening. That's so funny that I literally just did the global entry interview like 2 or 3 days ago, and they said we do not issue cards anymore. But then they're demanding it here. Like, what? So you're only going to have the legacy people that have the card go through? That's crazy.
They have so many TSA and they have one like,
Yeah,
CBP or whatever.
that's what I was thinking as I was going through. Well, there's plenty of other agents are walking around. They're just not checking people in.
What's the rush?
How many destinations is this for you guys?
This one is 10.
That's about the same for me.
Yeah.
Mine's 9, I think, and then 10 will be later today in Tampa.
Okay. Yeah, it's good progress for the end of the year.
I was trying to get it all done this weekend, like the first 15, but it just didn't happen. Yesterday, I tried to go to St. Thomas, but the connection in San Juan just didn't work.
Yeah. We have a very enthusiastic flight attendant who I think really wants this to work for us.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, for this trip, that really helped.
I mean, in the end, I guess we got it early, but.
back to San Juan. Again, this only counts as a repositioning flight because I've already been to San Juan a couple of times. So now I'm off to the lounge from Priority Pass, and we'll take a moment to walk there. I'm back at the lounge here at San Juan Airport. I ended up using this lounge about 4 or 5 times throughout the week because of all the frequent visits to San Juan Airport. This lounge is accessible through the Priority Pass, of course, and part of the Global Lounge collection. There's plenty of cards that will give you the Priority Pass, which gives you access to this lounge. I found this lounge to be quite small, so it's not very impressive when compared to the other Priority Pass lounges I've been to. And it also did not have a bathroom inside the lounge, so you would have to exit the lounge in order to use that. I highly recommend, if you're at one of the other concourses, to visit the other Priority Pass lounge, but that was far away from my gate, so I opted for this one throughout my adventure here, multiple trips to San Juan Airport. But it did have the basics: light bites, free drinks, and a decent enough place to sit down. Are you using this chair? Are you using this one? After a glass of wine for 2, I decided to make my way over to the gate and begin the boarding process to my flight to Tampa, and then finish the day there, hotel, recharge, and then on to Cancun. Tomorrow, back to Fort Lauderdale. Boarding began on time, and while I'm waiting in line, let's do a quick recap of where we stand in the challenge. Currently, I'm boarding my flight to Tampa. This will be destination number 10. Then tomorrow, off to Cancun, destination 11, back to Fort Lauderdale. Does not count as a destination because I've already been there. Then the following day, early flight from Orlando to Ponce, Puerto Rico. That does count as a destination, and that will be number 12. This future return to Puerto Rico will allow me to go to San Juan and then knock out the St. Thomas destination from there. St. Thomas counts as destination number 13, and now it's just a matter of booking the remaining 2 destinations for the 15, which will get me the 150,000 points, which I will then use to book the remaining 5 or 10 destinations, whichever I decide. I'm thinking at this point I might as well just go for the full 25. Comment below on what you think, but at this point it just seems like a decent enough gamble to see if JetBlue actually lasts, or maybe JetBlue gets bought out by another company like United Airlines and the status gets passed on to or matched to whatever the United status equivalent would be. I think in this case it would be United Silver status. But comment below if you think that's worth it, or if you think that I should just stop at the 20, get my 350,000 miles, and be on my way. I noticed that on all of my JetBlue flights this week that the entertainment screen welcomes you with at least your first name on the screen. And I think this is a nice welcoming touch. However, I kind of have mixed feelings about it because it kind of lets the passengers next to you know your first name and maybe you want to just remain private. I have mixed feelings about that, but comment below, what do you think? Is it a nice touch or is it too much? Cruising here at 25,000 feet, it's a nice setup with the clouds where there's a thick cirrus layer above and cumuliform clouds below, creating a nice sunset. Beautiful here.
Now we had a situation again, situation number 2. And this is from my arrival in Tampa. Whenever you book an airport hotel, a lot of times they have a free shuttle. So I know that's not always an easy process to get a hold of them, to call the hotel and request the shuttle. So I did that as soon as I arrived at the gate, which is why I don't have video for this portion. So I'm on the hold for like 15 minutes. Can't get a hold of anybody, get all the way through the terminal, still can't get a hold of anybody, following the signage of where the shuttle pickups are. I finally called the main line of the hotel, dialed 0 for the operator, and requested a shuttle. 25 minutes later, total of 45 minutes, I'm waiting at the airport for the shuttle, finally arrives. And this hotel, the Holiday Inn West Shore, just had terrible service, and I basically ended up asking for a refund. It was a total waste. Luckily, I did end up getting my refund a few days later, and I've never had to do that before. I've never asked for a refund in my 300 or 400 nights of hotel stays in the past 3 or 4 years. This was a first, but it happens. Now, following morning, I'm flying from Tampa to Cancun back to Fort Lauderdale. And I wasn't thrilled about having that Cancun to Fort Lauderdale ticket, which was booked through Etihad, because it was basically non-changeable, and at this point with my rescheduling, it was only valid as a repositioning flight. It's not really getting me a new destination. But my options were limited to change it, so I just stuck with it and used it as a repositioning flight. Let's recap the immigration process in Mexico. And I was actually really impressed. They had facial scanners, so everything was very smooth. And I did not even really interact with an actual immigration official. So for doing this kind of challenge, it's actually really easy to go in there for your one-day turnaround and leave without there being too many questions asked. And that's one thing I kind of underestimated through this whole process, was that if you're going through a destination, a new country, for just one day, that is looked at very suspiciously by immigration officials. And it's kind of difficult to explain that, oh yeah, I'm doing this 25 for 25 JetBlue challenge, and get them to understand what that is, why you're doing that, because they're just not going to understand. And in my case, a couple times, officials asked me, oh, so what do you do for a living? And it's like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that I was going to have to prepare myself to answer that kind of question with the one-day turnarounds in immigration. I was actually really impressed with the lounge selections available with Priority Pass at Cancun. Whenever you're doing a challenge like this, a lot of flights, you're going to need to eat somewhere eventually, and it's nice to get quality food for free through the lounges. So I was really impressed with that at Cancun. Highly recommend, if you're doing this trip, to have a credit card that gives you free Priority Pass access and get the free food and drinks. If you do want to get a card that has Priority Pass, you can go to the links in my description and get one of those cards prior to doing this trip. Some of those cards will actually help you with hotel stays as well by getting points. Now, my return to Fort Lauderdale didn't leave me a lot of options for scheduling the next flight for a reasonable price in points or miles or cash rate to get from Fort Lauderdale to a new destination. However, Orlando did offer that. So I ended up taking a flight from Orlando to Ponce back in Puerto Rico. That got me a new destination, and I did this with the plan of getting a rental car from Ponce to San Juan. I'll get into that portion later. So after taking this flight from Cancun back to Fort Lauderdale, this was the first time after having my global entry approved and having my pass ID that I was actually able to use the global entry for the first time. This was a game changer. I highly recommend getting global entry prior to doing this kind of challenge, or just getting it in general to avoid the long immigration lines. I received my global entry through the Marriott Brilliant card, and that's a great all-around card because you get the status benefits of Platinum Elite with Marriott. It has global entry, which includes TSA PreCheck, and has a $300 annual dining benefit, so $25 per month. So it kind of offsets the price of the annual fee right there, just between those benefits. I do have a link in the description for that specific card, and that will also get you the priority pass. Global entry is a huge value for this challenge because of the tight connections that you're going to have, whether it's coming back into the US and taking another flight, or going to and from the islands, Puerto Rico, St. Croix, St. Thomas, going through those destinations. It's a huge value to have the global entry prior to this challenge. And as mentioned before, if you have the global entry, this is a great way to kind of get around the scrutiny that you're going to be asked questions upon entering, re-entering again through US Customs. Global entry kind of eliminates that because now you're a trusted traveler. If you're not planning on having global entry prior to this challenge, I highly recommend not going through either US Customs or another country's customs, let's say Dominican Republic or Mexico, Colombia, any of those countries other than the US. I don't recommend going through their customs twice in one day. Most of these countries have some sort of like a QR code form that you have to fill out for entering the country, and I don't get the impression that it's going to be taken lightly that you're going to be entering one of these countries twice in one day. While the timelines may fit for the flights, doesn't mean it's a great idea. You might end up in a enhanced security screening back room somewhere, answering questions of why you're transiting their country twice in one day. So to avoid that, just try to avoid entering a country twice in one day.
I was really impressed with this Brightline lounge that is included with the premium version ticket. It's about $99 on average if you purchase last minute. If you purchase ahead, you can get it as low as $84, but the premium ticket includes the lounge access as well as a $10 Uber credit that's valid for 7 hours, and that's 7 hours from the time of departure, so either before or after. So you can use it to get to the Brightline station or after your Brightline train arrives at the destination. Here they have beer and wine on tap. I like that. And before I even got to the lounge, my team is already on the big screen here in the lounge. Michigan, go blue. Food and drinks are included with the Brightline premium ticket, so I took advantage of that, of course, and also caught up with my game that was still going on through majority of the train ride. I don't want to bore you with my overnight stay in the airport in Orlando, but here we are, destination 12. I'm just leaving Ponce, Puerto Rico in my rental car, and I was actually impressed to book this literally last minute at the airport. When I arrived in Ponce, through budget for about $60, I was able to get this rental car for just a 1.5 hour drive to San Juan, much cheaper than an Uber, which was probably double the price. Soon enough, we arrived in San Juan, and what a nice view here. The wind blowing the flags, alternating Puerto Rican flag and US flag. Really cool to see that. Just a perfect wind direction to keep those flags waving as I'm driving over the bridge. really cool. Had to get a video of that. And soon enough, I arrived to San Juan Airport to drop off the rental car. So I only had this rental for about an hour and a half at most. Turned it back in. And of course, I always recommend taking a video of the entire rental car before you turn it in. That way there's no issues later of the rental car company claiming you had damages, because anything obvious will show in the video that you're taking as your protection. Now I'm making my way over to the terminal to check in for my next flight to St. Thomas. After the short flight to St. Thomas, now we can count this as destination number 13. And on this flight, I was able to get pre-assigned a seat in the first row of the plane, which was very convenient for getting through the immigration process, of course. And this was the first time that I was pre-assigned a seat in the front like that. And it seemed like throughout the week, I slowly began to get assigned seats closer to the front of the plane in the more spacious areas, even though I didn't technically have Mosaic 1 status yet, and I still don't have it. Still working on that, waiting for a status match. But it did seem like there's maybe some back-end algorithm that tracks your progress, and somehow I was getting favorable pre-assigned seating somehow. Now, since St. Thomas is also a U.S. territory, it was the same process as St. Croix, where you deboard the plane and there's no customs, but then you do go through customs to reboard if you're doing this challenge and exit customs that way. This process, again, was even more simple than St. Croix, since I was able to kind of gauge the layout of the terminals that were pretty similar, and soon enough I was boarding again back to San Juan.
Those customers behind you can make their way to their seats more quickly when you get to an on-time departure. To expect your fairly full flight, we do ask your cooperation in placing any smaller items, any backpacks, purses.
We have a situation again, situation number 3. So now that I'm back in San Juan and trying to pick my next destination on a busy holiday weekend that I was not expecting this challenge to run into fully, it did. So on the 1st, which is the actual holiday, Labor Day, I booked a flight from San Juan to Medellin, Colombia. Now, I was kind of in a bind here with my return flight because the window to catch the return flight to San Juan is pretty tight. And even if I booked that flight, which it was kind of expensive, it was like $130 of taxes and fees plus I think 12,000 miles. So not a great rate. I booked that just because I had to have a return flight prior to check-in, but not really with the intention of actually using that flight. And this is kind of where things started to go wrong. So I arrive in Medellin and I go through customs to enter the country, do their QR code thing. They call it check MIG, and I get into the country. Now, my original plan was to take my existing ticket, return ticket, and cancel that, possibly rebook it, but with the basic fare, since my San Juan return destination would not count as a new destination regardless. But by the time I got through security to check in for that flight, so I'm already checked in online, and then I ended up calling to cancel that reservation with JetBlue while I'm in the Priority Pass lounge. And this was a critical mistake here. While I was able to cancel the reservation after checking in, after going through security and being inside the lounge, got my refund, then I realized that I've already stamped out of Colombia. So self-inflicted mistake here, not good. I began looking at additional options for getting back to either San Juan or to the US, also just exiting the country from Medellin to another neighboring country that would be a reasonably priced repositioning flight. Couldn't really find anything with that, especially the JetBlue options were out the window once I missed my check-in I couldn't rebook that flight because it was too late past the check-in requirement of, I think, 2 hours prior for this location. So that was out the window. Plus, I was already through security, so I couldn't even talk to a JetBlue agent. So not a great situation here. It ended up being that my best option was to book a Spirit flight from Medellin, overnight flight, 0 dark 30 situation, directly to Fort Lauderdale. This was an expensive flight. It was over $400. But it basically avoided me going back to San Juan, getting a hotel there, and or taking another not so great flight option from San Juan to, let's say, Punta Cana or wherever that also would have had a high tax exit flight. So while it did hurt up front to book this $400+ ticket with Spirit and have a terrible experience with that, uncomfortable seats and the full 9 yards, it did get me back to the US faster and avoid a hotel stay in San Juan. So then I booked my 15th destination from Fort Lauderdale, ending in Philadelphia. And then from there, it was fairly simple to figure out that I could book another ticket from Philadelphia direct to Detroit and pick up my car. Again, with having the priority pass, it's not the end of the world to spend, let's say, in my case, 10+ hours in a priority pass lounge. Internationally, these lounges have showers, places to sleep, food 24 hours a day, and free drinks. So not the end of the world. What a better way to finish the trip than having another situation. Situation number 4. My car is parked at DTW, Detroit. So no matter what, I need to schedule a flight back to there, whether it counts for the JetBlue Challenge or not. I tried to look at options from the Northeast, let's say Boston or JFK to Detroit. That way I could get Detroit as a destination finally for my return. Couldn't figure that out with JetBlue as a reasonably priced fare. And I could not find that with Etihad either, even though sometimes they do have award availability with JetBlue. I also did not plan ahead for this. So I arrived to Philadelphia without having my ticket booked from Philadelphia to Detroit. There is availability, but I didn't book it yet. And I saw this availability with Etihad. I do have 5,000 miles left with Etihad at this point, and I figured, okay, I'll just buy the additional 1,000 miles to buy that ticket if I need to. I should have done this way in advance, because I found out in this case, after arriving in Philadelphia, that if you buy miles with Etihad, even though it's super cheap, $20 per 1,000 miles, it's not available right away. So I purchased it and then realized, oh, my account hasn't been adjusted. And it didn't get adjusted until the next business day. They did have availability directly through American Airlines. Now, being so late, I could not book this ticket myself through the app because it was so close to check-in. I would have to go to a American Airlines agent directly and book it at the reservation counter. And that means you wouldn't be able to book it with miles. Now I'm sitting on 4,500 miles, not quite enough to book the ticket at 8,500 miles. So I had to purchase miles. Luckily with American Airlines, the miles are available right away when you purchase them. So I ended up paying about $140-ish with the award taxes and fees to actually book this ticket and buy those miles. But this did get me the direct flight from Philadelphia to Detroit. Now also remember, I wasn't able to book this first available flight myself because it's already past the check-in time frame. So I was only able to book the award ticket at 8,500 miles for later in the evening, which I didn't really want to be driving at night after not sleeping the previous night. So I booked that ticket and went to the check-in counter as a standby for the next available flight. Now, this flight is super close to departure. It's practically almost check-in time frame, and there's about 45 minutes till departure.
Finally back in Detroit. While this destination didn't count as my 16th destination because I took the American Airlines flight, it did get me back to where I could pick up my rental car, and that's where I'm waiting now for the rental car shuttle to take me to the off-airport site parking. And that brings us to the end of the video here. I'll be coming out with another video soon of how I would do this challenge all over again, but differently. Stay tuned, like and subscribe. We'll see you again soon.